Hi everybody, this is Brian at 3dmetaltools.com. I hope that everybody is doing really well. Hey, I just finished up this Red Dead Redemption sawed-off shotgun, and this is a really fun model. It took me, I don't know, a little bit more than 2 hours, but it's definitely an exercise in curves. I'll get to that in a second, but if you're looking for this model, this is a Red Dead Redemption exclusive, so the only place that I know of that you can buy this is from Rockstar Games. So if you go to the Rockstar Games website, or the Red Dead Redemption 2 website, then that's where you'll find this. And there's also two others. I believe that one is a train and one might be not a Gatling gun, but a different gun. Actually, I have them right here. Hang on a second. Let me just find them for you. So, because they look like they'll be fun anyways. Yeah, there's the Maxim gun, and then a train. So I have not done these yet, of course, but this is the Red Dead Redemption collection. The sawed-off shotgun, train, Maxim gun, and of course I did the sawed-off shotgun. I'll work on the others another day, but this was enjoyable. I did have a lot of fun with this. I have no idea how long these will be available, but being an exclusive, if you like this, you might want to head over to Rockstar Games and pick up this one quick, because I can imagine that it's probably going to be obsolete or out of stock before too long. That's just my guess. I really have no idea. But as far as some building tips and my overall thoughts on this, this is just an awesome exercise in curves. If you take a look at this model, really, the handle and the stock underneath here are the only portions of this gun that are flat. These hammers were very difficult. The trigger guard here was very difficult, and then forming the handle around these bends right here was fairly difficult as well. It's interesting because when I first saw this model, I thought, all right, well, getting these barrels to be perfect cylinders, that's going to be the real challenge. But in my opinion, the challenge was the trigger guard, the hammers, and everything else around here that's curved. So let me cover the barrels first. They weren't that difficult, but what I used was a cylinder form like this one. Stay tuned, because I will have these available on our website soon. I'm waiting on just a couple things, but if you can see, what I used was a 450 or 450 thousandths cylinder / dome form that's 11.4 millimeters. You could probably go a little bit smaller than this too if you wanted to. Obviously, if you don't have pin gauges or cylinder forms or anything along these lines, you can use a pen. And if you take a look, this is just a standard pen that I have laying around, and it's a little bit too narrow. So if you have just kind of like a fatter pen, maybe one of those typical like Crayola markers that are fatter, then that might be perfect for forming these barrels. So that's what I used. It wasn't that big of a challenge. Essentially what I did was just rolled them on my jeweler's block here, so I had a nice flat hard surface to create those barrels, and they came together pretty well. So let me get into some more specifics about this and the things that I had that I thought was either challenging, or that I would give you advice as to how I would approach it again if I were doing this again. So when one thing that I will say is that it's always good practice whenever you're doing any metal earth model. Remember that if I need to create this perfect bend for, let's say, this barrel here. So this is the barrel, and I need to create this bend, and it needs to be a half bend. So it's not actually a full circle, it's just a half. So how can I figure out what that angle really should be? Well, you should always look ahead, because anytime that you're building a metal earth model or a 3D metal model, any type of bend that you're going to create, any type of form, is nearly always going to mate with something else, right? So when I'm looking at these instructions and I'm trying to figure out how severe or what exact radius should the bend be on this barrel, well, don't forget, that part number 6 right here in the instructions is going to tell me exactly what that should be, because part number 6 mates with these barrels. So as this is part number 6 on the gun, as I was building this and as I was sizing up what diameter cylinder form I would use to create this these barrels, of course what I did was I looked exactly at that piece, and I found that my 450 diameter cylinder slash dome form was the same diameter, the same radius as that. So that's an important thing to always consider, and that goes for really any 3D metal model. If you're unsure as to how a form or a bend or an angle should be, look ahead, because you'll always see a part that's going to mate with it, and you can refer to that part to find exactly what those angles should be. So let's go on to another note that I had in here, and that's the trigger guard, and that's here. So if you see part 9 needs to have a bend that is actually curves down, around, comes up, and then curves outward again. Well, the neat thing is, again, look ahead, because part 10 is going to give you exactly what that curve is. So right there is what that curve needs to be for that part. And then of course part number 11 sits on the other side. So with this trigger guard, creating exactly this bend on the bottom, I could refer to these two parts to find exactly what they were. And that's where, speaking of bends, I will get into a whole set of tutorials on round nose pliers. But if you don't own round nose pliers, I would really recommend that you pick up a pair, because these are very, very useful for forming curves. You don't necessarily have to have a cylinder form or a dome form or anything along those lines if you're willing to put in a little extra work with these. Now, cylinder forms and dome forms always don't work in every situation. So before I get too much further with this, I might as well just take a minute and kind of show you how I do use round nose pliers, because like I said, I'll do a full tutorial, but for me, I wouldn't start this model without a decent set of round nose pliers. And what are round nose pliers? Well, I think that you can see by looking here. I'll try and get this to focus well. If you can see, and if I can focus on the tip of round nose pliers are obviously round, and then they taper out so they're like a cone. So you can see how these are round, of course, right? So that's very useful for making curves. If I were going to take a piece and I wanted to bend it and use, let's say, like these needle nose pliers or chain nose pliers, which I use all the time, that's not a great idea, because needle nose pliers like this and chain nose pliers like this have a flat surface on the interior. The interior surface here is flat. So if you're going to take a piece and squeeze it, you're going to flatten it, and that's no good when you're trying to make round forms, of course. So that's where you probably could get by trying to do round forms and bends and curves with chain nose pliers, needle nose pliers, certainly not flat nose pliers, but I highly recommend that you use round nose pliers instead. And let me give you an example. I mean, basically these are jeweler's pliers, and the way that jewelers would use them is to take a wire, or generally wire, and form it to a perfect diameter. So this is a piece of sprue that I just cut out, okay? It's just a scrap piece of metal that we use in these models. Let me show you how this can work. If I take my piece of metal here and insert it way down into the base of the round nose pliers, okay, I can grab it and I've got a good hold of it. Then all I got to do is bend it around. And take a look. I've got a very good and perfect curve, right? That's where round nose pliers really, really shine, and that's where it's going to be useful in this. So let's say I purposely used the base of the round nose pliers because that's a bigger diameter, I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to flatten it back out. So I'm going to use the pliers to kind of bring it back out, and then I'll get some flat nose pliers to get this back into shape. Okay, so it's relatively flat again. It's not perfect. Let's say I want to make a tight radius curved. Well, of course, I'm going to grab it at the tip and take a look. There's a very, very nice curve that is a perfect shape due to the round nose pliers. If I were trying to do this with chain nose pliers, when I squeeze, I'm going to flatten because the inner surfaces are flat. Round nose pliers, the inner surfaces are round. So that's perfect for doing this. Or if you want, you can take, if you need to make a wide curve, you can take the round nose pliers and just give a bend, a bend, a bend, a bend, and just kind of move your way out. And there you go. You've got a curve. So, round nose pliers. I do have them available at 3dmetaltools.com. Right now, I don't have my economy versions. I do have the higher end made by Tronix, which I'll get into more about Tronix tools in another tutorial later. But anyways, if you can find round nose pliers, very, very useful for this model especially, but very, very useful anytime that you need to make a curve. And so let's move on to another spot in this model. As I think I covered this pretty well, but you can kind of see how I could even take this scrap piece and shape it to be that if I wanted to. I already did some little creative stuff there. I could probably go ahead and do that right now if I wanted to and use this as a model. But when you're doing that, use this curvature as your model and the round nose pliers to create that perfect shape before you go to engage it. And then what did I have next as a note? On part number 12, okay, again, this gets back to that very basic principle. This curve, well, that part is going to be the bottom of the handle right here, this curved handle. This right here, well, how do I know what curve I should make that? Well, always look ahead, and you can see that part number 18, right here, once it gets formed, it is going to go along this curvature right here. So when you're looking at this piece, well, I got to bend that, and then I got to attach it to the trigger guard. How am I going to know what that curve should be? Look ahead, look at the part that it mates with, and then you got it right here. Then you can grab that part, physically have it in your hand as you're creating that bend. Now next, part number 18, which you can tell just by looking at this. This is a complex handle. This is the handle to the gun. It does state this in the instructions, and I definitely would recommend that you do this, which means all these tabs that are coming together to create the handle, fold them inwards. So when you insert them into the slot, the tabs will be inside the handle. So if you look at the handle of my gun, there are no tabs that are sticking out. They're all bent inward and they're inside the handle. If you went the opposite way, I think that this gun would look kind of ugly because you would have all these folded and twisted. You'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a lot of these tabs that would be sticking out instead of hidden on the inside. So make sure that you bend these tabs inward. So bend these here, these here, these here, inward, so that they will exist inside the handle, not on the outside. I think that would be pretty ugly. Then the only other thing that I will mention, I fixed the mistake, thank goodness, but I did make a mistake on this, and that is, I fixed half of it. The other half I didn't want to fix because it would be too complex. Part number 15, just pay attention that the engraved side is supposed to be up. And For me, that part is right here, okay? And it only means that there's texture here, so it wasn't obvious to me. So I didn't have that put up in the right position, and then I also made a silly mistake, and I had, well, because I had that backwards, I put this part, number 16, on the wrong side. So once I built this, I realized that this, I don't even know what part this would be on a gun. This looks to me like maybe it's the rear end of the sights, but let's just call it the rear end of the sights. The rear end of the sights right here, when I built this portion here, which is part 16, I accidentally put it on top instead of the bottom. So pay attention to that. That's the only other mistake that I made. So overall, this was a really cool model. I like it. I'm a big fan of Red Dead Redemption 2 anyways. I was actually playing it before I built this model, and I got right to the part, well, I can't say it because I might be spoiling it for people. But anyways, it's a fantastic video game, and I love it. And I also love the way that this gun turned out. It also turned out a lot larger than what I thought. It's a little bit over 6 inches, and it looks great. It's a fantastic exercise in curves, bending, getting used to round nose pliers if you don't already have some, or if you don't use them, then maybe pick up a pair and give them a try. And if you don't use them very often, then you'll get a good workout with them on this one. All right. Hey, I appreciate it. This is Brian with 3dmetaltools.com. Thanks for watching.